Ladies and metalfish, this is your handsome and hard-boiled duelist Daddy Janjo here. So, here we are at the finale of the month of GX. A while back, I made a video on the rocky start to fusion monsters. Duel Monsters era Yu-Gi-Oh! Didn't do much to make the fusion mechanic feel special. Anything that was usable was typically a fusion monster via special summon rather than fusion summon. This is where Yu-Gi-Oh! GX comes in. GX was known for not introducing any extra deck summoning mechanic, for that zone was still called the fusion deck. Rather, GX was fondly remembered for its expansion on fusion summoning. So let's take a closer inspection on just what exactly they did to expand the use of the purple cards. Fusions in the DM era were rather sparse. Gaia the Dragon Champion, Dark Paladin, Thousand Eyes Restrict. But when it came to GX, fusions were the whole strategy to the anime protagonist Jin and Yuki's deck. It's time to wake up those elemental heroes, because with these new guys and gals released in the Lost Millennium, now you can form a deck revolved around fusion summoning. Prior to this, you had cards that could special summon fusions like Cyber Saiyan and Magical Scientist. Fusion monsters like Last Warrior from Another Planet and Gatling Dragon were good, just that they were singular cards and not an archetype. The main fusion-based deck from this past era would be Go Control, making use of Thousand Eyes. Again, this would be an instance of a card, that being Metamorphosis, making use of a good stuff assortment. GX would see this line of thinking too, with Stein and Cyber Twin Dragon, before Stein would get emergency banned in December 2006. But Heroes would be the first time a group of cards would be tied together under the fusion umbrella. And what an emphasis on these heroes GX made. There are countless combinations to pick, so let's look at Elemental Hero Avion as an example. This normal monster in the GX era can be fusion material for Mariner, Electrum, Tempest, Phoenix Enforcer, Wild Wingman, and Flame Wingman. That last monster could also be material for Shining Flare Wingman. Phoenix Enforcer would even be an alternate fusion target for Avion and Burstinatrix, making even more possibilities for card design. Suddenly, that Elemental Hero Avion has a plethora of uses in regards to the extra deck. So now not only monsters could be used for a multitude of fusions, you could use fusions for fusions, and not even counting the additional forms of heroes GX would introduce, like evil heroes, some of which didn't need specific materials like Dark Gaia or needed only one malicious fiend. And GX didn't stop here, as they'd keep pushing the fusion boundaries further. And if you're enjoying this video, then drop a like or a sub if you haven't for more historical Yu-Gi-Oh content like this. If you want to support me further, consider sharing this video around or becoming a patron for as little as $2 a month. Your help goes a long way. The Neo-Spacian archetype introduced a new form of fusion summoning in Contact Fusion. Now, you didn't even need polymerization to fuse, which for a long time was an issue for fusion summoning. XYZ Dragon Cannon came kinda close. Back then, Poly had yet to receive a ton of reprints. You either had to get it in LOB, in the Joey starter deck, or in Dark Beginning 1, so once a year you had a chance in the DM era. Otherwise, have fun with Fusion Gate. Thanks to Contacts, you just had to shuffle specific monsters you controlled into the deck. Sadly, with this Neos archetype specifically, the fusion gets shuffled back into the fusion deck unless you controlled the field spell Neospace. Now, if only there was a reprint so I could play Air Neos nowadays. Contact Fusion would be expanded further as GX pressed on with a more meta-relevant archetype in Gladiator Beast. These gladiatorial animals were much like Neos cards, without the caveat of being sent back into the fusion deck. However, they did include an effect to do so to summon 2 Glads from deck, so now instead of there being a mandatory downside, you had the option to tag out for further combo plays. When Gyzarus would be released, Glads would finally become a top tier meta deck, and the first time a fusion deck in every sense of the word would be competitive. Heroes also had the very first archetype specific fusion spell, Miracle Fusion. This opened the floodgates when it came to fusion based archetypes like Shaddolls and Gem Knights. Overload Fusion was close in regards to this, and even still it just showed that GX was not messing around. I haven't even mentioned other new fusion spells during this time: Instant Fusion, Future Fusion, and Dark Fusion. The first two alone could be contenders for best fusion spells in the history of Yu-Gi-Oh! This is not even considering super polymerization, which could fuse monsters on your opponent's side of the field. In hindsight, fusion spells should have had their own card subtype like rituals, but I digress. Considering the GX anime, many prominent characters had fusion monsters as their ace. Zane and Cyber End-Dragon, Alexis and Cyber Blader, Cyrus and Super Viacroid Jumbo Drill, Aster and Destiny End-Dragoon, and so on. It was clear that not only did the team behind GX want to focus in on the fusion mechanic, they wanted to expand it in multiple ways. You had materials that could fuse into various monsters, variations of fusions for that matter, fusions made from fusions, contact fusions moving beyond just a gimmick, and even archetypal fusion support. Regardless if Yu-Gi-Oh! GX had subpar core sets or that a majority of the new archetypes still needed pieces to be any good, what this era did for the original extra deck mechanic cannot be ignored. Hell, if it wasn't for this focus, we may not have synchro summoning or anything beyond. Who's to say where Yu-Gi-Oh! Would have gone had GX not decided to take a unique spin on the card game? It was this risk that would ultimately shape the future of Yu-Gi-Oh! I understand that some people may not like all the extra deck shenanigans every era expands upon. However, you take a look at fusions at the very least, and see that before this, it was a laughable addition to the game. GX took what they felt was an underdeveloped element and pushed that to its limits without affecting what makes the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! At the end of the day, Yu-Gi-Oh! GX would create a lasting legacy that I will always be happy to go back to. After all, you're never too old to learn a thing or two at the Duel Academy.